Congresswoman Rebecca Vale had the kind of smile that sold hope and deception in equal measure. At 52, she had perfected the art of the political performance. Her salt and pepper hair, tailored suits, and unflinching gaze gave her the image of a seasoned leader. She had risen through the ranks of Washington with a mixture of charm, grit, and carefully curated alliances. To the public, she was the champion of small businesses and the working class. Her district, a mix of Rust Belt towns and suburban sprawls, adored her. They didn't know she rarely spent more than a weekend a month among them, preferring her luxury condo in D.C. and the quiet opulence it afforded. What the public never saw were the whispered dinners with lobbyists, the red-line drafts of bills edited by corporate lawyers, and the encrypted messages exchanged with her investment advisor, Paul Marston. It was Paul who had helped her understand how much money could be made if one knew which legislation would pass and which wouldn't, especially if that legislation directly affected massive industries. Healthcare, defense, tech. And Paul knew how to play the market just right. She had resisted at first, briefly. But temptation doesn't need much time to win. It began innocuously, just one investment tip from Paul in early 2022. A pharmaceutical bill she was co-sponsoring would cap insulin prices. She dumped shares in a drug manufacturer days before the announcement. The stock tanked. She saved $240,000. Everyone does it, Paul had told her over a quiet lunch at a Georgetown bistro. They just don't get caught. And he was right. At least, for a while. Over the next 2 years, Vale's portfolio grew by over $3 million. She insisted the trades were legal, that they were managed by a blind trust. Her staff never questioned her. Her constituents only saw a congresswoman who brought federal funds home and gave inspiring speeches. But not everyone was convinced. Zara Bell had been Vale's legislative aide for 3 years. Ambitious and idealistic, she had joined the team fresh out of graduate school. She believed in public service, believed in Congresswoman Vale. But the cracks began to show. Zara noticed how Vale's positions would quietly shift before closed-door committee meetings, how she'd place calls from her office phone right before major legislative news dropped. And then there was the file. A carelessly left open email that mentioned holding off on the defense stocks until after markup. Zara screenshotted it. She wasn't sure what to do at first. She consulted her law school roommate, now working at the SEC. That's insider trading, her friend said. And if you've got more, we need to talk. Zara started collecting evidence. In March 2025, ProPublica published an exposé titled, Profit and Power, The Secret Trades of Congresswoman Vale. The story detailed a pattern of suspiciously timed stock trades, traced to bills Vale had insider knowledge of. While her name had never appeared on the brokerage account, financial forensic analysis connected the transactions to Paul Marston, who had no discernible source of income beyond managing Vale's blind trust. Social media exploded. Congressional ethics watchdogs launched investigations. The SEC opened an inquiry. And the Department of Justice began quietly building a case. Vale did what most politicians do: deny, deflect, and posture. I have never engaged in insider trading, she told the press. This is a politically motivated hit job. But the evidence kept mounting. The House Ethics Committee subpoenaed her financial records. Her carefully constructed wall of deniability began to collapse. Paul Marston, facing charges of securities fraud, agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. His testimony was damning. He detailed how he received tips via encrypted apps. He showed transaction records. He played audio recordings of meetings with Vale discussing the legislative calendar and their portfolio. Federal prosecutors moved quickly. Vale was indicted by a grand jury on 17 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. When FBI agents arrived at her D.C. condo with a warrant, the cameras caught it all. Handcuffed, she kept her chin high. The trial of Rebecca Vale was televised, dissected on news panels, and followed by millions. The prosecution painted her as a greedy opportunist who had sold the public trust for personal gain. The defense argued it was all circumstantial, that she had no direct control over the trades. But the jury wasn't buying it. Zara Bell testified. So did Paul Marston. So did a former Capitol Hill IT technician who recovered deleted messages from Vail's devices. On the 23rd day of the trial, the verdict came in, guilty on all counts. At her sentencing, the judge was clear. You violated the trust placed in you by the American people. You used privileged information to enrich yourself and lied to cover it up. You eroded faith in our institutions. You will serve a sentence appropriate to the damage you have done. Rebecca Vail was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Her political career ended in disgrace. Her wealth, seized. Her legacy, shattered. Zara Bell left politics and started a nonprofit advocating for government transparency. She published a memoir titled The Price of Power. Congress passed a new version of the Stock Act, closing loopholes and increasing penalties for insider trading by lawmakers. Rebecca Vail, once considered a rising star in her party, now spent her days in a prison library, reading legal textbooks and wondering when, if ever, she might get a second chance. She would not.